The message that as a designer, and probably beyond just being a designer, you can get involved in the problems you care about without it being your direct job. It's not about going to a company that does that thing. If you care about pedestrians or bikes and e-mobility, go ride bikes. If you care about community and food, go to the community garden. This doesn't have to be a thing that you do for your living. It just can be something in your life, enriching you and enriching others.
I'm really excited that she could answer questions so thoughtfully about like how to integrate into these communities and why, like why she should be involving herself in systems like this. Because I think it can be a real pitfall of designers or people in tech or sort of people that perceive ourselves as having these problem solving skills that we insert ourselves sometimes into systems in a superior way. And that is not what she's doing at all. I really feel like she's pretty grounded and humble about listening to the experts and just understanding like how she can make their current operations function really well.
And this is an industrial design podcast still, and definitely a lot of design thinking around food management, waste. It's interesting to talk about it and see different perspectives and ask those questions, and also ask ourselves what we can improve and how we can take our abilities and skills to put into that discipline as well. That everyone every day, doesn't matter what you design, you're always like eating and producing waste, and you can be more thoughtful about it.
I think it's a real impressive skill to connect the thing you're good at with like actually this level of passion. Like I think it's not easy, even as a very thoughtful designer, to start working on the problems that move you the most, like gaining access almost to that work is a hurdle in and of itself. And obviously she's starting her own company to deal with it, but the bravery to do that is really interesting, because I think even with very high ideals, a lot of designers, do have to pick and choose like how closely we can do the thing that we want as our profession and how much it's just sort of like what drives our hobbies or our free time or our other interests, right? So it's like a dream really for them to kind of come together.
Yeah, to first know it, identify what it is that is so passionate to you, and then free yourself to go and work on it. Not everyone gets to do that.
Okay. Welcome everyone to another episode of Beyond Ray, the woman-led conversation on industrial design. Today we have another amazing guest, Steenwyk. She's industrial designer who recently left after 5 years Rivian, who right now is very familiar to all of you, to pursue her own venture while managing to join design thinking, service design, and the designer's approach to agriculture, and focusing on the challenges that climate change is bringing to us and trying to make food industry more sustainable. Zab, go ahead and tell us a little bit more.
Thanks for the introduction. That was great. My name is Zab Steenwyk, and like you said, I was trained in industrial design, and being a very human-centered person, I feel like I also just took up design research as a very natural kind of symbiotic part of my design process. So industrial and design research. And most recently, I got to be at Rivian. I started there before we had even launched any of the vehicles. So pretty wild ride to go from a company of like 500 people to, I think there's like 14,000 now. But in the midst of all of that, I kind of stumbled upon this interest in regenerative agriculture my senior year of college. And it's been festering in the background as I've worked at these different companies doing industrial design. And to me, there just is this huge opportunity and also need to make regenerative agriculture something that's extremely human friendly, easy to access, easy to understand, better communicated, easier to eat, right? There's so many aspects of that. So yeah, after 5 years at Rivian, there's so many amazing people there now. And I felt like I could probably make a larger impact by leaving and starting to put my focus on combining that passion of design research and design thinking, service design, kind of with a focus on regenerative agriculture. So I have a couple of different prototypes going right now on what that could look like in the future as a more full-time thing, but I'm really enjoying the kind of exploratory phase that I'm in at the moment.
So there's a lot of talk about like regenerative systems with sustainability, and I think that we all have an idea of what you're talking about, but maybe a little more clarity on like what is regenerative agriculture? What does that look like?
Yeah, so in a very like simple definition is regenerative agriculture is growing food in a way that leaves the ecosystem better, healthier than you found it. And there's a lot of facets to that. So it can look, like companion planting to reduce the amount of pesticides that you need. It can look like laying down compost and mulch and growing certain plants like legumes that actually fix nutrients back into the soil, growing a large diversity of plants instead of kind of a monocrop system, because when you're growing a diverse grouping of plants, you're bringing in different types of pollinators and predatory insects and birds, and all of those like pieces of the puzzle are then playing a role that we've largely replaced with chemical fertilizers and pesticides and whatnot in kind of your traditional industrial agriculture. So those impacts that synthetic fertilizers and pesticides have, it's not just on the land, right? It ends up affecting the communities that are in these regions that are really like heavily farmed. And ultimately for me, like the reason that I got into industrial design was because I Googled art that helps people. And to me, like when you have these systems infiltrating your groundwater and affecting the air that you're breathing, like being able to change that is kind of the purest form of art that helps people in my mind. So
I think I'd like to understand also like what you mean by you stumbled across this. This is pretty different of a field than design. And I'm curious why you started learning about it or got so excited by it.
Oh, this is such a rabbit hole.
Okay.
And I will try to take the shortcut. I ran cross country in college and ate at the cafeteria every single day. I lived on campus, the whole thing. I love my school, but like their cafeteria food wasn't the thing that they were known for. And so milk was kind of this consistent protein source for me, running cross country and doing, 11 to 12 miles a day. So I was drinking a lot of milk. And at one point, I stopped drinking milk to try to deal with an acne problem. And instead, this racing heart that I had dealt with since freshman year of college just went away after I gave it up. And it was so shocking. It was something that I had gone to the doctor about. We had tried to figure out where it was coming from, chalked it up to being a design student that was stressed out, running cross country, working on campus jobs, the whole thing. And so I just thought it was something that I had to live with. And then kind of growing up, there was kind of this refrain in my household of like, food is good for you, food is nourishing, like all of that. And there's plenty of background there too. But yeah, when I had that experience, I was like, this food isn't good for me. Why is this food not good for me? And that led me to understand concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs, where a lot of that milk was coming from, the stress that the animals were under, the impact of those CAFOs on nearby communities. And I feel like it was just this thread that as I kept pulling on it, it led me to kind of understand the worlds that we live in, because I think food is so enmeshed in all of the global systems today, and how we live, and yeah. And so food led me to sustainability and everything that it was a very like deconstructive time as well, I think, within the food system, where there's a lot of documentaries talking about how we were doing it so poorly. And I got to the point where I was like scared to eat anything because it felt like everything had a negative impact, like there was nothing good. And my first kind of exposure to regenerative agriculture was through a book called The Third Plate by Dan Barber, who is the chef out of New York, partnered with this family farm that was turned into an educational center called Stone Barns, and really started to work with the farmer there, who was like, no, you're going to cook whatever I have to grow in order to make sure the soil and the land is healthy. And so, that was like the first time in that whole kind of learning process that I was like, food can be good. This can be a good thing. Whoa. And and I think I'm willing to look at problems dead in the eye, but I really, really, really then like working towards solutions. I don't like just knowing that a problem exists and kind of sweeping it up under the rug. So regenerative agriculture became that solution that I just wanted to learn more and more about.
When you looked at that problem that looks so big and that made everything around you look like a, scary thing to eat, it's obviously a huge problem, food in and of itself, and then sustainability, another huge problem to tackle. How did you feel about taking on a problem so big, or in that time of deconstructing, was that a process that made you feel like this is something that I can do and this is how I do it? Was that clear to you?
I mean, like I said, when I was first learning about it, there was probably 8 months where I just kept finding out things were bad, like over and over and over. And so what I thought were safe havens, it was just a matter of time before someone was like, nope, that has a negative effect too. And so that season was really, really tough, because I didn't know what a way forward could even look like. And a lot of it was a personal journey, I think, to start, because I just wanted to do better. And most of the people around me, as I was talking about it, sharing it, they're kind of like, oh, okay, so that's cool. But like, they weren't sensing the gravity of the situation that I felt like, was something I was wrestling with. And so I started to kind of really get into my own head and just try to look for solutions, because the solutions seemed to be the things that people were interested in hearing. And so, at the beginning, I think when I was thinking of it and understanding it as a systematic problem, I just tried to look for the ways that I, as an individual, could be a little bit better about it. And after kind of honing that individualist approach, that's when I started to realize, like, that's not going to make the level of change that needs to happen, because there's ingrained systems that we have built that make that individual change almost impossible. So I think that's been a 7, 8, 9-year journey now to get to that point where not only am I interested in joining things to groups to change things systematically, but that I feel like there's a clear enough solution in my own mind so that I can start hacking away at a piece of that system.
Right.
I don't know if that answered your question properly.
I think that helped. That makes sense. It started with an individual journey, and then you just reached a point where, nope, it's a whole system.
I'm one person. Yep, exactly. And I think being at Rivian was really instrumental to that too, because we started with such a small team. And I think at the beginning, you can look at a lot of the things that small team started and be like, wow, that person made such an impact. But the reality is that to bring something to fruition truly requires 15,000 people, right? In order to make that change, you can set a vision, you can build a prototype, but in order to actually start to make that lasting change, you need to get a lot of people on board running in the same direction, and committed to, solving problems together that are really hard under a lot of stress. So yeah, so that I think really started helping me appreciate the more of like a group solution, systematic change approach. But yeah.
So with Rivian being maybe for you a test bed of process where you can see how an individual impact grows to a group impact, or a group effort, how, like, what kind of headspace are you in when you say, okay, I'm done here, this has been good, and I can take what I learned and run with it? Like, how do you know you're ready?
I think I've always had very, very strong gut feelings about things. When I've ignored them, I look back and I'm like, those were some of the worst decisions of my life. And this particular decision to leave Rivian was largely driven by the feeling that if I stay here, the impact that I can make is not as big as the impact that I could make leaving and trying to focus this skill set and this perspective on a problem that is getting way less of that attention. Rivian in particular has, captured the imaginations of a lot of people. And so there's designers out there that are way more talented than I am that can go there and add to what the team is doing in a really, really meaningful way. And I'm so excited to see what that looks like. I don't know of very many people who have that sort of excitement for compost or shellfish, or like it's a little bit more niche at the moment. And so to me, leaving and taking that time, I think is the most valuable resource, right? And so my matrix for decision making is always, where can I make the most impact with my time? And my gut was very, very strongly telling me that I could make more impact by leaving Rivian. But yeah, but it's still, that's not to say that like me as a solo individual is going to make all that impact alone, right? It's more about taking the skill set that I've built and honed over the past, a decade or whatever, and joining that up with someone else who spent the past decade learning how to grow the best scallops and the best mussels, and and yeah, it's going to be a lot of partnership for sure in order to make any sort of meaningful impact.
You're definitely answering this right now, but it's a question that I really wanted to get into with you, which is like, yeah, why are designers needed to come in and fix sustainability, farming, food issues that are actually really old solutions? Like if we reverted back to a simpler way of doing things, if we weren't like using so much technology, arguably we'd be in a better spot. And so what does a designer show up with that helps, that's not like taking us further down the like tech and the separation road, I think there's people in our community that possess this knowledge already. And it sounds like you're saying you want to find them and amplify them, which is really cool. But yeah, I just want to hear you talk a little bit more about why you're a person that should be doing this, why somebody that's outside of this industry should be doing this.
I think an example, that's totally fair. There's a lot of people who are already doing this work in terms of growing the food and working towards regenerative solutions. What I see being a disconnect is that designers have made things so easy in every other realm of your life that now even like making a home cooked meal from scratch can feel overwhelming, right? Like meal planning it out, going and getting the groceries from a farmer's market, making the time for that in your busy schedule. Even finding the farm in the first place. Amazon has made all of us so used to that one click, and it's sent straight to our door, right? And so you're telling me now that you have to go to 3 farms websites that you have to wake up on your only day off and get to the farmers market, before 10 a.m. You're telling me that they don't have any sort of social media presence. You don't know what's in season. There's a lack of clear communication around what's actually sustainable, right? What's actually good, because there's so much greenwashing that's happening. And I think what a designer brings to the table, maybe not every designer, but I've listened to a lot of the episodes that you guys have done. I think a lot of the women that you're featuring, like one of their main drivers is empathy and doing things in a way that makes these kind of challenging, hard things easier for people and better experiences. And I've also interacted with a lot of farmers, and some of them have a background in design, marketing, all of that. But realistically, they have it's not even a full-time job. It's like a full-time job and another full-time job, just running their farms, right? And asking them to then become experts in SEO or marketing or design research and product development. That's a lot to ask. That's the most intense startup that I've ever heard of. And so, yeah, I think coming alongside of them and being I've taken time to develop these skill sets. We can do so much together if we partner and merge those two things. To me, that's why, and with so much humility too. I'm I am a straight up food nerd. Let's talk about it. But there's going to be things that out of practice that I only know in theory. And so, yeah, definitely a lot of humility there. But I think that there's a real benefit in working together and bringing those different skill sets together.
Yeah, thank you for letting me ask that. I know that's maybe a hard question, a bit of a push, and I appreciate that you know why you're doing it. Yeah.
Totally. Oh yeah, for sure. It's not an insecurity, but it's something I'm very aware of, especially my grandpa had a farm. A lot of my family members are in that world, and I am definitely the yuppie cousin that moved away and
city folk.
Yeah. Has a very different but I'm but I'm also obsessed with worm composting in my apartment, and I'm trying to grow these tomatoes like grandpa used to, So I think it's it's bringing that humility in and saying, if people care about the same thing, you can find those bridges and move forward.
Out of curiosity, how was chatting to farmers for the first time? Did they treat you seriously, or were okay, designer, what can you know about what I'm struggling here with?
Yeah, a little. To be fair to them, I don't think that I had my pitch right. But yeah, I think there's a lot of farmers that it's a different world. It's a different world to start talking about SEO and customer personas and figuring out what I guess I should preface as well that part of my professional education basically was going over to the brand team on Rivian as well, or at Rivian as well, and doing brand strategy work for them. So when I say I'm an industrial designer, design researcher, I also have that kind of background of trying to merge who is this for? What do they actually care about? What's positive, and how can we create something that serves them? So yeah, when you're talking to farmers about all of these things, I didn't even know what SEO was until 2 years ago. And that's kind of it's in my world. So there's a lot of stumbling through, just again, trying to be really genuine, humble, be I really just want to help. And also I think one key thing that helps a lot when you're talking to farmers and food people is a prototype of what you're even talking about in the first place. something that is tangible, right? It's something that's like sitting there in front of them, whether that's a recipe, whether that's a website, whether like all of those things, I think go so much farther than just saying like, oh, but I could build this website for you. What do you think? You know, if you actually show them how their life could be different once they have it and how they could better connect with area restaurants or farmers markets or local pickers, like that goes a long way. So, and it's the same thing in the design world, right? If you want to get your idea across, build a prototype, let people play around with it. So
How do you know what's the right prototype to build? Are you building like one prototype and then talking to a bunch of different farmers, or are you building this prototype for that farmer, this other prototype for a different farmer, because they grow different things, or they have a different size of operation, like, or they have different needs? How are you making those decisions?
yeah, it's definitely not one website for every farmer. So I guess how I'm approaching it, in this case, one of the prototypes that I'm working towards is creating that digital platform for farmers to be able to upload their information really easily and then be able to use this like streamlined platform to have a website, have a social media strategy, have like all their SEO optimized. And right now, because I'm just in the beginning stage, it's looking like building a website individually for each one, learning kind of the nuances of this customer base, and also trying to identify what are the nuances between like a U-pick farm versus maybe an attraction farm that has a bunch of other things going on there, host events, whatever, versus like a heritage pork facility that was like trying to graze them regeneratively. And all of those people have different needs in terms of how they're trying to reach their customer base. But there are some commonalities in terms of how they interact with technology, what you can tap into that they're already using is also another big one. Like one of the things that I'm doing for a farmer right now is that I'm just attaching their Instagram page to their homepage. So every time that they post an update about their farm on their Instagram, it automatically updates the website. So they'll never have to touch the website. It's all through an interface that they're already familiar with. And I think those are the kinds of little touch points that I'm trying to understand right now. Like, all right, what are you using? What do you feel comfortable with? How can we just amplify that even more? But yeah, it's a lot of doing things for free too at the start and being like, I'm a student, I'm learning. And yeah, I think when you offer people like, I'll do this for free, I just believe in what you're doing, that also helps.
Or you'll do it for veggies.
Totally. Oh my gosh. 100%. One of the guys is a U-pick berry farm. And the last time that I was there taking photos, he let me have all my U-pick berries for free. And I was like, that's all I need. That's all I need. Sold. So yeah, like I said, I'm a food nerd. So I think that also comes through too, where it's like, I just want to see these people succeed, whether or not I end up building this out as a full-on company or not.
Are they getting suspicious that you wanna do all that work for free, basically?
Oh, 100% suspicious. 100%, 1000% suspicious. Again, where the prototype is really helpful to be like, I'm already doing some of this for free. And yeah, I think the only way to build trust with people is over time too. Mm-hmm. So it might not be until I finish the website and optimizing their digital presence and until they trust me. But hopefully after that, if I reach out, I'm like, hey, can I ask you a question about like working with a designer? Can I ask you like those? That's kind of where the value exchange is happening, right? Like I might be giving them a lot upfront, but I find when you treat people well, they also are down to treat you well in the future, not always monetarily.
I think that a lot of what you're tapping into, at least from what I've seen in my sister's farm community, is just like, yeah, there's more exchange, there's more trade, there's more consideration about just what everybody brings and can provide to each other in service or care or food. And so it makes sense that it is potentially like a less, financially driven group. I was curious what other values you've started identifying that you can honor in their business model as well, and sort of how you feature things like that as you set up their systems?
Yeah. I think community, which you mentioned, is a huge one. Frugality is another one. There's that willingness to exchange value, but only if it's actually valuable. And I think that's been a little bit of a shift for me as well in terms of farmers. Realizing like what is truly enough is definitely like a different value set than some of our hyper affluent tech driven customers were at Rivian. And oh gosh, like I think just that ease of use, but being like informed too, right? At the end of the day, there's like a self-sufficiency mindset for sure, where they're like, I can figure things out and I don't want to be reliant on someone else to do all these things and be tied to that long term. But the ramp between like just being a farmer in your day to day and then having like a sick online presence, that's like it's a very very long ramp. But if you do 85% of it and then you give instructions for the last 15, like there's definitely a willingness there to be self-sufficient in that way. So those are just the things that I've observed so far. And I'm sure as I do more of those prototypes and kind of refine the process that I'll find more. But yeah, it's for me, it's part of the fun. Like I love doing the design research and truly understanding people. So whatever I'm making like actually deserves to exist. That's like the thing that makes, I don't know, I'm so excited about. So I love how we're just like super narrowing down too on like design for food system. I'm like, yes, this is the first time I've been asked to talk about this for like an hour.
It's really interesting. It's really unique. Like I think what you're trying to do is, I'm sure some other designers are doing it somewhere, but it's not a common overlap with the industry that we're in. So I think it's really special to get your perspective on it. I'll ask one more question for now, and then one of you two has to go. You were talking about how much you love research and really, getting into why these problems matter to these people. I think food is just really emotional. Everybody has like family history with it and recipes that are passed around and stories about particular ingredients that are really important. How do you feel learning about food in design research is different than learning about other things you've done design research on?
I think food is just like the most holistic thing that I've ever had to research and understand, because like you said, there's heritage attached to it, there's story attached to it, both in the ingredients, the recipes. It can be fuel, it can be this like escapist moment, it can, so understanding why people eat certain things, when they eat it, what they're looking for. Is it, like there's kind of this spectrum that I've started working through, and there's a lot of people who are looking for food for connection, and it's a story to tell about like, well, I got these oysters from this farm and that matters because of this thing that my grandma used to tell me. Like, they're the story weavers. And then there's other people who are using it as like a happiness microdosing agent of like, with everything else going on in the world, at least this thing in front of me is like so beautiful and cute and delicious, and it's going to make me feel happy for a little bit, so yeah, I think there's a lot, and everybody eats, and it's constant, right? 3 times a day, maybe 2 or 1 if you're like terrible at taking care of yourself. Like classic designer, architects are the worst at it. I'm like, I swear you guys don't eat at all. But yeah, that there's like so much positive emotion that goes along with it. But there's also a lot of shame in certain circles. Like I think I mentioned during our intro chat, both of my brothers had eating disorders when I was in high school. And like, so, and I live in LA, and the body standards here for people, like, it's just wild that there can be so much held in whatever's on your plate, right? And so learning to to wade within all of that complexity has definitely been the most challenging. And then also combining like, great, humans need to eat, but then the planet is responding to how we're eating. So it just feels like it is the most complex and holistic and interwoven thing I've ever researched about. So yeah, it's a doozy. But again, after like 7, 8, 9 years, I feel like I've found something that I feel like I can put my integrity behind and that I'm really excited about. And I think starts to speak to some of those things that people are looking to food for, whether it is connection, happiness, microdosing, fuel, but doing so in a way that's respectful to the planet and respectful to the people impacted. So yeah, this is the first time a design project has taken me 8 years. Let's just put it that way.
Let's talk a little bit more about design and food and like design projects around food. Like I'm thinking all the subscription boxes to like cook your own meals and like initiatives to try to sell deformed vegetables as like the own unique thing and like trying to brand them as something else to be like more sustainable. Do you have like any of these projects that are your favorites? You probably like stumbled upon many of them while doing your research. Like what are your thoughts about those different initiatives and what are your favorites?
There's a couple. There's like, and it doesn't even have to be super tech driven, right? Like I think CSAs are an amazing, super rad innovation of like bringing people into the farm and making them be invested in like what food gets to their table that summer. So, and I've seen a couple of farms start to partner together. There's, especially in LA, there's a bunch of things that I've kind of tapped into, and LA Home Farm does a really cool partnership between like, I think 8 different farms, and they're very different from each other. So there's like one that specifically grows heritage grains and another that's doing like these beautiful stone fruit and all the veggies you could ask for, and bread and cheese and different sauces. And there's like an herb company. So starting to tap into some of those systems is really cool, and something that they're already doing by themselves. The one company that I can think of that I was like really, really obsessed with was Zero Grocery. And unfortunately they went out of business, but they were doing zero waste food delivery, which was super cool. So everything would be delivered in glass jars and you'd use them, clean them out. And since they were coming pretty regularly, you would just set the tote out with all of the packaging still in it. And it was a really cool circular system. I just ran out of baking powder from them, and I was like, baking powder comes in a plastic container. But yeah, so that I think was an interesting example for me to watch and case study for me to watch, because it was kind of like this utopian idea of convenience and sustainability combined. And trying to think of some of the other ones. I mean, all of the tinned fish companies that are doing things with like really ethical, traceable sourcing is cool to me. I love Vital Farms and the way that you can literally put in like the code on the side of the carton and see the farm that the eggs came from. Like there's a lot of cool ways that people are using technology to make sustainability like less greenwashing and much more visible. So I think anything that's doing that is really rad. And then I'm trying to remember what the name of it is, but there's I think it started in the Bay, and I always forget it, which isn't a great sign for their name. They chose. It's very clever. I just always forget it. It's one word, classic, like 2010s branding. Oh my gosh, Mill is what it's called. And it's like a compost bin type situation. But you put the food in, it dries it, it grinds it, and then you pack up like the the compressed, condensed food scraps that are now dried and all of that. And it gets sent to chicken farmers that then use it as a feed, which I just think is like such a, I don't know, like those are the things that I think are so exciting. It's not just about a meal delivery plan, but it's like, how do you start to adjust and change the systems and provide that transparency and truly provide something sustainable? Yeah, those are the things that come to me off the top of my head.
That's a lot. Yeah, sort of relinking some of the loops that we have accidentally broken by living in cities or, yeah, overcomplicating systems.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of anything else. I'm like the biggest evangelist of in-apartment worm composting. I think it's like such a cool way to connect with like a bigger food system on a very small scale. So there's a couple of companies that are doing that pretty well. I think one of them's called Hot Frog.
What is that name? Hot Frog worm compost?
I think it's bright lime green, but it has like Eames furniture legs on it. Like it kind of looks like a piece of furniture, but like because of the green, it kind of looks like a frog, and compost heats up. So I think like Hot Frog, I don't know. That's like my best guess of why it was called that. But yeah.
This is so funny.
Are you looking it up?
Yeah, I did.
Frog.
They also make a purple one.
They do.
With more like birch color legs.
It's like more of a hot hippo kind of vibe. Yeah.
So you're like a user of all of these things. You're in the user group, and I'm wondering how you compare yourself to the rest of the prospective or actual users. Is that ever something that like is a roadblock for you or something to overcome? Or do you feel like, no, we're all like pretty aligned?
I think this is one of the beauties of being married to someone who isn't exactly like you, because I think that there's a lot of things that I do and I'm really excited about. And my husband over time has become more and more a champion of some of these things, but like he's always a really good litmus test when I'm like, hey babe, I just ordered 2,000 worms. And he's like, what? Then it's helpful for me to realize like, okay, that's not something that like normal people would do.
That's a lot of worms. How many go in the bin at once?
A lot.
How do you shift them?
Google Uncle Jim's worm farm. He's the best. He ships them in coconut coir. And they like he's very meticulous about it. They show up, they rehydrate fairly quickly. But yeah, 2,000 worms isn't actually a lot. It's like, I think 1 or 2 pounds. And because they're Canadian red wigglers. I'm sorry, I'm such a nerd. But when you get me rolling, it happens. So yeah, I think it's 1,000 worms is 1 pound. And Canadian red wigglers in particular are very, very good at taking their food scraps and converting them into worm castings. They can do like twice of their body weight in a day, which is crazy. And so when you think about how much waste the typical like American family produces, having 2,000 worms, if they can eat 4 pounds of scraps a day, makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I think getting back to the conversation of like, how do you compare yourself with the people who realistically, like, I think this is again where design becomes really important. A lot of the current ways of doing things is very niche. It's not super user friendly. It's also not cool. Like I don't make friends talking about worm castings at parties. Although I have tried.
I'll be your friend.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And so that is something that I'm hyper aware of, and then trying to figure out, okay, well, where is that really coming from? Is it that you don't want to compost? Is it that you don't want your like apartment to smell because you think having a worm bin inside it would? Is it that you can't imagine having like insects and creepy crawly things in your house? And like there's an ick factor when it comes to worms. And I think just doing these things, like doing these experiments on my own and then sharing them and acting with curiosity, right? Not like, oh, you don't have a worm bin? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, yeah, okay, tell me why you wouldn't have a worm bin. That's all information that as a designer, like we're always looking for those bits of information, right? So as a designer, I can take back and ask, okay, how do we build a better system then, knowing these things about people.
Yeah, and there is like big lack of knowledge and also like prejudice. For example, composting at home. It's totally possible, but people just cannot imagine having 2,000 worms in the kitchen.
Small,
but like
small.
Red wigglers.
yeah. But like lack of education is a big problem. Like even thinking about like seasonal fruit and vegetable. My sister told me that like a few months ago, her boyfriend figured out for the first time why strawberries are cheaper in the season. He didn't know there is a season because we are just so used to seeing strawberries in supermarkets that
Totally.
some people who like, I know I was growing up not like in a farm, but vegetables we were growing our own, some of them, and it was natural for me that like, okay, some fruit is only for a month or two available. This is when you eat it for the whole year, and you will wait next 10 months before you have strawberries again. And like living here in US now, I'm like shocked. You can get strawberries in January.
Totally.
Like they're not that good, and you're just not aware how to optimize not only what you eat, but also how much you spend and how sustainable or unsustainable you are.
Mm-hmm. Oh, girl, it's like been a 7 or 8 year project of like every single week as I'm meal planning and figuring that out. I think that's where going to farmers markets has been really, really helpful for me. Even if it's not every week, it just helps me calibrate like what month are we in? What is edible now locally? It's very easy to get out of that connection very quickly too. I feel like I had a connection in high school, and by the time I left college, I had to relearn everything again. So again, this is where just like that humility and understanding that like it's not people's fault. It's like the system that we're in. And what are some of those ways that we can start to shift the system to make the sustainable seasonal option the easiest one to get?
Definitely. What do you think are those big barriers for people in terms of sustainable food? Is it food deserts? Is it giant corporations? Is it an education thing? If there was something that you could just sort of like point at that and change it forever, zap it out of existence, what would you do today?
Man, if I had one magic wand, it's a great question. I think actually, if I had one magic wand, it would be setting aside land for community gardens and connecting elementary schools, middle schools, high schools with it so that you're growing up with that awareness. It's close. You have sovereignty over the food choices you're making. And also I think like little kids, when they're the ones who are responsible for having grown that thing, like it tastes delicious. Also, I will say most kids probably hate vegetables because like of the vegetables that they're getting, right? They're like super cheap. They're out of season. You know, it's the strawberry in January that you're like, I don't really even know if I like strawberries.
and the frozen broccoli.
Exactly. And so there's like a difference when it comes out of a garden that you are a part of. But right now, property values are very prioritized towards development. There's not really a model for land trusts and shared use of land to have that sovereignty. Even in LA, like it's great if you own a home and you can have a backyard garden, but so many people, especially our age, don't have any access to owning given this market, you know? And so, yeah, I think if local governments did really prioritize the health of their community members, one way that they could do that pretty easily is through having a community garden program and making sure that people get involved.
Did you consider going into politics? I think we can have that for president.
Oh my gosh. Well, one of the things that I was looking into was actually like, I didn't realize that some cities have chief design officers. And I just thought like, that is the coolest role that you could possibly have of just trying to take all of these city systems that like a city should provide its constituents and its citizens, whether that be education, housing, food, water, like how you treat waste, transportation, mobility, and just having someone there to bring design thinking into the room. I was like, that is the coolest thing. That's what I want to do. But the part of that that matters the most to me is food. And so like, I'm just going to lean into that and try to highlight a couple of things, but I'm also pretty young in my career. And so for me, I feel like I got to understand so much about mobility working at Rivian that now it's a continuation of my education, right? Now I get to learn about the food system from the inside. Now, maybe someday I'll work on housing. Maybe someday I'll work on like compost on a larger scale. I don't know. The possibilities are endless, but
yeah, we probably had like 10 different startup ideas during this conversation. So
totally.
People, there is work to be done. Just go pick any of these ideas and go help out working on this.
100%. And yeah, and I would say like, it's so cool as I've started to move towards more of like a systematic change approach to tap into people who have already been doing this for a really long time. There's a community garden in Solano Canyon, which is like pretty close to where I live. And I volunteered there for the first time earlier this spring and was just like amazed by the work that they were doing, converting this like unused patch of Elysian Park into a community garden. It's like over the highway. There's cars passing through all the time, but like that was super cool. And I just went to a meetup for Bike LA, which is trying to make the streets of LA more pedestrian friendly and give people more options for micromobility, because it's not really a thing here. So there's so many ways to get involved. And I think designers, we think that like the most impact we can have is through our job, but actually like bringing those skill sets to the table with and joining them with other people who are passionate about changing the same thing as you are, actually can make a huge difference. So look for people who are trying to make the change that you want to see in the world and join them.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about the Sellfish venture, the tinned shellfish, and why that's what you're going to focus your energy on right now?
Yes. Yeah, I do. So tinned shellfish started after I read this book called Eat Like a Fish by Bren Smith in 2019. I almost quit Rivian at the time in order to become an ocean farmer because I was so wowed by the fact that this really, really nutrient dense protein could be grown for really cheaply, actually. Like starting a farm, the first year is about $30,000. And after that, the operating costs go to about $5,000. And that's starting a 20-acre farm. And each acre, according to Greenwave's website, can grow like 250,000 pounds of shellfish and kelp every year. So like you're talking 5 million pounds of this protein, but you're not putting in any fertilizers. You're not adding any pesticides. They're actually growing by like consuming all of the runoff nutrients that, especially because of like our monocropping industrial agriculture, like all of the extra nitrogen, all of the extra phosphorus is running off through these waterways and into the bays. And so when you're growing shellfish in 3D ocean farming, is what like his approach is called, you can actually clean the waterways. Without those shellfish there, what would happen is the excess nutrients in the water would create these algae blooms, which algae requires oxygen to photosynthesize. And so it ends up creating these dead zones where fish can't survive. And it's pretty gnarly. It's pretty devastating on coastal communities. So when I found out about 3D ocean farming, I was just like, this is such a cool way to feed the world, especially as regenerative protein starts to become one of those things that is like for most people's budgets out of reach. Think of like grass-fed beef, right? From your local farmer. Suddenly, like that's $28 a pound. And I'm sure it's worth that. But like I'm a college student, or I am in the middle of my first job, or I've been like disadvantaged and I might be in the middle of my life, but that's still not like I'm trying to afford rent. So finding out about this protein source that checks all of those boxes of being accessible, being restorative as it's being grown, and being super, super nutritious, my imagination was captured. And so I did get convinced to stay on at Rivian. One of my friends was like, no, you're designing the chargers. Like you have at least stay until you finish designing the chargers. And I'm really glad that I did stay, because I ended up going to the brand team after that and learning so much more about storytelling and how to actually like communicate this really cool thing that does require a little bit of a behavior shift. So yeah, so then as I was thinking like, all right, I knew I wanted to shift into design thinking, systems design, service design for regenerative food. I did this book called Designing Your Life. And through that, I think I was eating a like tin fish one day while doing Designing Your Life. And I remembered 3D ocean farming. And I was like, man, I should order some of those tins, because I'm sure someone has started a tin shellfish company that's using 3D ocean farm shellfish. Like, this makes so much sense. And so I Googled and there was nothing there. And I was so shocked because like everyone was importing it from Spain and Portugal. And they've been doing this type of like restorative shellfish farming for a really long time. But I was like, there's farmers who are doing that in the US. There's so many ways that we could do that here. Why is this not happening? And so I think I was like just really miffed by it, but not even thinking that that was something that could be my job. And then I was sharing with my partner, which again, it's so helpful to have a partner who like challenges you and doesn't always agree with you, because he was like, well, like you should do it. I was like, and I just kind of thought about it for a while, but like I couldn't get it out of my head. And it was one of those things that not instinct, like when my intuition was just like screaming at me, like, this is something you should do. That's how it felt. And so, yeah, I'm working. And the reason that I want to do tinned shellfish is because it's one, aluminum is one of the most sustainable materials because it's very easy to recycle. And most of it does get recycled compared to plastic, which is like 8% or something of that produced. It is shelf stable without needing any sort of refrigeration. And so it's incredibly like energy efficient. It is really great and convenient as someone who's like has a weird life schedule when you're talking about like, oh, I'm working a lot, I didn't have time to grocery shop. You can stock up on tin fish and have it ready to go. And like, as long as you have rice or pasta or bread or salad greens or something, like you can make a meal of it pretty quickly. And yeah, so there was like this interesting kind of intersection of regenerative convenience food that I saw there. And using the design background, again, it's not traditional industrial design. That might be my background, but I think I've just started leaning into the fact that sometimes the solution isn't going to be a physically designed product. Sometimes it might be a tin of shellfish, partnering with a really cool shellfish farmer and working with like really cool distribution partners to shift the way that people think about food. Yeah, that is Shellfish. Can I tell you guys what the name is? I want to get your reaction on this.
Yeah.
So the brand as a whole is going to be called Sellfish. So Sellfish Shellfish.
Cool.
And it's based like, it's kind of this play on the word, because we think of selfish as being this really negative thing in the past. But the idea of being selfish is actually about doing what's good for you. And I think a lot of people don't realize that sustainability isn't just an altruistic thing. We talk a lot about, what's happening to someone else somewhere else, but I'm trying to reclaim it a little bit and say, the effects of being unsustainable are things that we all share. We share air, we share water, we share the chemical load being put on these fields where our food is growing. And so it's really more about redesigning the food system for the health of ourselves and the health of our family and the people that are very immediate to us, that we have that emotional connection to and we're willing to make changes for. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do with Sellfish. And then it will be focused on regenerative proteins, different ways of doing protein than what we see with industrial agriculture. It starts to become a platform for a lot of other sorts of storytelling. So Sellfish being the mother brand for regenerative convenience food, and then being able to talk about like, well, what are people using their time now that they've saved it by eating the shellfish, just popping open the can, like what are they using that night to create, right? To change about the worlds that they live in. It goes back to that, like time being the most valuable resource. And so what impact can you make with that time being given back? So there's a couple of other things that I want to do eventually, but starting with tin shellfish is what Sellfish is going to be about.
So, to be clear, starting a 3D shellfish farm, your spouse didn't bat an eye, and in fact, suggested it, but buying 2,000 worms.
I mean, the great thing is, yeah, so 2000 worms was 3 years ago. And I've really managed to brainwash him over the past 3 years. So now he's very pro worms. They even got mentioned in our wedding vows.
Oh.
So he's the best. He's also a designer. And so I think there's a lot of fun that we have in challenging each other's ideas. But then when we like start to see the nugget of truth, it doesn't have to be fully fleshed out in order for us to like kind of see the vision that the other has and really like encourage and build around that.
Can I ask how many worms do you have right now?
Oh, I don't know. Do you want to see them?
Sure.
While we walk over there, I also just want to say that I know it's like shellfish, but it's also going to be shelf fish.
Exactly. Oh, girl, I love puns.
It.
I love them. And so that was like one of the immediate ones. I was like, maybe I should just expand it past shellfish. So this is like, they're like right underneath my shoes and my closet stuff.
Small.
Oh, wow.
They're in closet. I thought it's in the kitchen.
So these are like some of the babies. Yeah, they're very calm.
Oh my God, you're touching it.
But yeah.
Are some worms not calm?
No, I think all worms are calm. But that's why I feel comfortable holding all worms. Yeah, so you can see like here, hopefully. These are all like the worm castings. And it's just like our food scraps and basically all of the packaging that I get my stuff in. If it's cardboard and it doesn't have any crazy dyes on it, then you can rip it up and use it as their bedding. So
yeah, I will say I don't feel like I batted an eye at them in like a kitchen, but something about them being in your closet feels weirder to me. I'm like, oh gosh, like I guess they're still gonna stay in there.
Yeah, what do you think it is about like the closet versus kitchen?
I guess just it's more like it feels like it's closer to being in your bed or something. Like you're on your body in your clothes, you know?
Yeah. What if they escape and go to your shoes?
But they're not on a mission. It's not, I mean, they're not like pests, right?
No.
Yeah.
No, they're pets.
More pets than pests, for sure. No, they're not going to escape and go into my clothes. When they first get here, if you don't have things like set up to match their specifications, which is like slightly damp, lots of cardboard, like food scraps buried in it, they can try to crawl out, but they don't like climb walls. so like, most of the surrounding floor is safe. There's no like shoes or anything. And then, but after probably the first like month or two, all of the worms have been born into that box. And so they don't really think about escaping.
That's their home. Yeah. Honestly, the only way I can imagine it getting gross is like if other pests found that thing, right? And is that I don't even want to talk about this. I have such a roach phobia, but like that could be a big problem, right? Like, so yeah, it's like this comes back to making sure that you know a couple key things about worm composting. And the number one thing is to make sure that you're burying whatever food scraps you're putting in there. So it does not smell at all. If you're doing it wrong, it will smell and it will attract pests. But I've never seen any roaches in there. When I first got them in 2020, I think I was adding way too much food scraps way too quickly. And so I did get like some little spider mite things. And then as soon as I balanced that out with more cardboard, then it went away. But yeah. Oh my gosh, this is going to be the weirdest episode of Beyond To be honest, it's super interesting. Don't sweat it.
To me, it's like it's part of like the design, like a systems design.
Yeah.
Right. Like in order to live well on the planet, you have to respect the materials you're using.
Yeah.
So it does connect. It's a very hairline connection, but there's a small bridge there.
Okay, Zab. So we have talked to you at length about food, which is so interesting. And, I think we had to do that because you're the only designer I've encountered that really has this passion and this focus going forward. But is there anything that you want to tell us about your time at Rivian that really, put you on this path or helped you feel like you have the skills to take this leap?
I think a long time ago, I was trying to decide between an internship at like an ATV company and a tiny little design consultancy. And I thought I was making the decision based on what the products were that I was going to be working on, especially as an industrial designer. I think there's a lot of focus on that in school. What type of products do you want to design? Do you want to be a footwear designer? Do you want to do consumer electronics? And someone gave me the advice, go where the people are that you want to learn from. And I've continued to reference that advice throughout all of my professional career. I actually didn't want to work at a car company ever. I was pretty explicit about that through school. And even when one of my internship managers reached out about Rivian, and I was like, no, I'm not going to work at a car company. I'm not interested. I don't think that they have a very human-centered approach. And he convinced me to come and interview. And I just met person after person after person that I wanted to learn from. And I think it's so interesting that without that advice, I wouldn't have gone to this place that has taught me so much about building a meaningful product, about building a brand around it, storytelling, figuring out who you're actually for and speaking directly to them in a meaningful way. And so that would be like the thing that I would just want to shout from the rooftops and pass on to the next generation of people. And like, for me, it wasn't who has the best renderings. Like, where can I learn how to build this CAD? How can I learn how to like do really hot sketches? Although there was a lot of that at Rivian, and there was a lot of insecurity going along with that for a very long time. But identifying what you want to learn and then finding the people who can teach you and running after that has led me way farther than saying, nope, I want to work on this type of product and I'm going to go wherever I can work on it. And it allowed me to hop around and I think get a lot out of the experiences that I was given, because I was always trying to like learn from the people that I was around. So I love Rivian to this day. I have so much respect and admiration for everybody there because they really were teachers for me. And yeah, I'm going to start crying if I talk about it too long. They're just, yeah, they've shaped who I am as a person, not only as a designer, because I was learning about both during that time. So
That's awesome.
I also really respect that, of course, you're still going to be around people, going to be around the shellfish farmers, but I think it's really also commendable that in the next chapter, you're sort of like, you're giving yourself a lot of space to learn from yourself. Like, you're the person that you're going to be around in the next chapter, listening to your intuition and having a lot of space and reflection for following, what is an untraditional next step. And that's really exciting. So,
yeah, it's also continuing to learn from people around me. But I think I'm having to be way more conscious and intentional about curating that list of people, of like reaching out to someone who I want to learn from and having really, really good questions ready to go so that I can keep growing, because I don't know it all yet. Sometimes I think I do, but then reality hits me and I'm like, all right, got to talk to another person.
Well, Margaret, why don't you hit us with the big question?
I wanted to ask you what's your favorite color, but now I really want to ask what's your favorite shellfish.
I was going to ask, what's your favorite food? That seems like a very apt question.
Ooh. Oh my gosh. Can I answer all of them? Because I've been preparing for the favorite color question.
Yes, we want all the answers.
Yes.
All right. Favorite color is fluorescent yellow, like highlighter yellow.
Ooh.
Because it's what I aspire to be. It highlights problems and things that need attention, but it does so in a very joyful, energy-giving way. So big fan of highlighter yellow. Not to wear, but
yes,
it's your spirit color.
Exactly. Favorite shellfish. I really, really, really like, this is so hard. So I got in through mussels, but now I would actually say cockles, which are like these little European clams. They're just like very, very small. I've been converted. So I would say cockles now, and I'm not a clam person. I wasn't a clam person for a very long time. So if you guys get a chance to try tinned cockles, they're worth it. And favorite food, Okay, this is going to sound really weird, but have you ever had a cracker with a spring radish, grass-fed
That is real
butter, and a
specific.
little bit of molten sea salt on top?
I don't know if it was a spring radish. I've had butter and radish. It's really good.
Yes. Yep. So add the cracker on the bottom and a little bit of molten salt on top.
Okay.
It is
Delicious.
like, oh my gosh, I can eat it like candy. And it was a shock to me when I like found out that those things went well together and that I could eat radishes like candy. That was also very shocking. So I would say that those are some of my faves. And any fruit that grows in Michigan on the side of the road.
What fruits are those?
You can get mulberries, you can get pawpaws, there's apples. I mean, you can go down a rabbit hole when it comes to foraging. Saskatoon berries. Oh my gosh, I almost didn't mention Saskatoon berries. Yeah, just any, like, I don't need a lot. To me, it's like if you have really, really high quality ingredients, then it's like a way to appreciate the season that you're in. It's like a form of meditation almost. Like you are here, you're in the present. It is July. Like that's when food gets really exciting to me.
Yeah, you want me to ask the last question? Sure. So you probably know this one's coming too. We love to ask everyone, what is their truly unique contribution to design that nobody else brings?
I asked two people that I trust very, very much what they would say. And their answer was like, you care so much and you bring that thoughtfulness and warmth into both the interaction with your teammates and also to the problem, because like you really do care about solving the thing at hand. It's not an ego thing. It's really trying to be like, how do we make the world better for the people around us? I would say that I am the only person that you're ever going to find bringing pine cone jam to your design office. And that is the result of like diving down these rabbit holes, sitting with complexity, and then finding a path forward throughout that complexity into something where it's like, hey, this is a solution. This is interesting. Have we thought about this? And so I think that I'm not going to ask the team to do anything that I haven't personally tried and worked through and tried to really experience myself. So I think there's a level of care, just caring very deeply that I do bring. And that's what other people see. But that caring is the result of like really going like silent research for years to try to figure out like, okay, how can we create a solution out of this?
Well, really glad that you do share your silent research with the world. I'm super excited to see where it all goes.
Yeah. I'll send you guys some tins once it's up and going. You can give me some feedback on it.
That's so exciting. Zab, I know that you're in the process of establishing this company, but where can people follow along to see your work and keep track of you?
If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, it's Steenwyk. I'm also on Instagram, and I do tend to post a lot of stories of like these weird food things. I'm still figuring out how to like share it in a very meaningful way, kind of like what I'm working through. But yeah, if you're interested in any like weird food related things, you can find me on Instagram at sobs.steenwyk. And those would be the two best ways. Send me a message. If you're connecting with me on LinkedIn, I've heard a couple of other people say it on the podcast, just send a message about something that you related to on the podcast. I don't know if there's going to be anything, or just like share that you heard the episode. So that's why we're connecting, and yeah, can make that meaningful.
That really, 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 really should be a no-brainer. I don't know why people think that they're, going to know who you are. But yeah, absolutely. Fair note. And you can find us. Best two places, as always, are our Instagram, which is wid_Seattle, and our lovely website, beyondraypodcast.com. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much. I love what you're doing here, and I'm excited to listen to all the future episodes.
Thank you.